So today is Saturday, September 9th. So just to open, a little bit on koan practice, which came to me during our break or break from regular schedule. Rose and I were actually putting in hours every day. I was working on the book, and we were working on issues of the Zendo. But it was great to do it up on the deck by the river among trees and stars and such. So up there, I had a chance to reread, after many years, The Lord of the Rings, which is quite a wonderful book. If you don't remember how wonderful it is, I suggest dipping into it. I thought it was an incredible piece of writing, an incredibly wise piece of writing. In any case, up there, I realized that Merry and Pippin, if you remember them, and I hope you haven't just seen the movie because the book is so much better. The movie is nothing compared to the book, or the movies. Merry and Pippin have a little chat in which you realize they're getting to the essence of, or one aspect of koan practice, which I thought was very interesting. It takes place when Merry and Pippin have just left the houses of healing, and Merry has been restored after stabbing the Nazgul and suffering greatly from his courageous effort. And Aragon, or Strider, has been revealed by being a healer as the true king. So please think of this conversation in relation to koan practice, and maybe reveal a little of what I think it's getting at, and then we'll get on to the teisho proper. Pippin says, "Dear me, we tooks and brandybucks, we can't live long on the heights." "No," said Merry, "I can't. Not yet, at any rate. But at least, Pippin, we can now see them and honor them. It is best to love first what you are fitted to love, I suppose. You must start somewhere and have some roots, and the soil of the Shire is deep. Still, there are things deeper and higher, and not a gaffer could tend his garden what he calls peace but for them, whether he knows about them or not. I'm glad that I know about them a little." In other words, they've met some very lofty beings, but they agree that they can't live on those heights, but they can see them now, and what a difference it makes. Just seeing them, knowing that they exist. Aiken Roshi said, completing the entire koan curriculum is just a good beginning. So let's just accept that we're not going to be suddenly transformed into super wise and enlightened beings by passing a few koans. But what we can do is get a glimpse of where the old guys and these women of the past, the ones whose dialogues make up the koans, were coming from. And we can live with them there for a minute or two. We get to catch a glimpse, an insight into that realm, even though we ourselves can't yet live there. And that, just seeing them, understanding them for a minute, getting where they're coming from, makes all the difference. It changes us. So just to keep that in mind, Merry and Pippin are onto something when they say, we can't live long on the heights, but yes, what a difference it makes to just catch a glimpse of such people, that they really do exist. So when we do the ancestral line later today in our chant service, if you're with us at that time, keep that in mind. Those people, we can't live them, but as them yet, but we can certainly appreciate what they've left us and what they offer and what we can get a glimpse of now and then. So on to one of our great ancestors, Zen Master Dogen. This is my favorite translation of Dogen's these are 8 sections of the Shobogenzo. It's Norman Waddell and Masao Abe. I think it's just the best translations. They only did 8 fascicles, and of course there are 95 fascicles in the Shobogenzo, and probably the best complete one is the Kaz Tanahashi edited one big volume. But I would like to read from the first thing, or read the first thing. Maybe we'll do all 8 of these in a series. The first thing that Dogen wrote after returning from China to Japan, and he wrote it in Chinese. So it's kind of as for our first Zazenkai, and returning to in-person practice, I'd like to read the first fascicle, which actually did not appear in the Shobogenzo proper, but it was his introduction to everything. It's the Fukan Zazengi, universal promotion of the principles of Zazen. But we'll start with the translator's introduction, because it's good. This book offers annotations of 8 key fascicles from Shobogenzo, the major work of Dogen Kigen, 1200 to 1253, founder of Japanese Soto Zen. Among the fascicles translated are 4 Bendoa, Genjo Koan, Busho, and Uji that the Soto school has regarded as representing the heart of the entire collection. We've also included a translation of Fukan Zazenji, a brief but important text on the principles of Zazen. Aside from a few autobiographical references found in Dogen's own writings, the particulars of his life are known largely through the early biographical records compiled many years after his death by priests in his Soto lineage. According to these traditional accounts, Dogen was of noble birth, his father an important figure at the imperial court, and his mother a daughter of the powerful Fujiwara clan. He began his monastic study at age 13 at Yokawa, the center of Tendai esotericism on Mount Hiei, near Kyoto. He later spent time at the nearby Onjiji, Midera, a rival Tendai monastery, situated in the foothills of Mount Hiei. He then moved to Kenenji, a Tendai temple in Kyoto, where in preceding decades the Tendai priest Myoan Eisai, 1141 to 1215, had been introducing the teachings and practices of Chinese Zen, which he had acquired from teachers of the then dominant Linji, which is Rinzai, lineage during 2 trips to China. Dogen entered Kenenji around 1217, and for 7 years he studied under Eisai's student Myozen, 1184 to 1225. In other words, for 7 years he did koan practice. And in fact, the Shobogenzo is, there are countless brilliant, extraordinarily unique koan commentaries that make up the Shobogenzo. This is a bone of contention in Soto schools today. The Soto establishment, essentially, has taken a kind of odd turn, eschewing koans as if somehow Dogen was against them. But the thing in the Shobogenzo is he never says these are koans. He just says so-and-so said to so-and-so. And then he comments brilliantly. What you realize is he's drawing on koan practice all the time. So contemporary Soto, at least the official school, not individual Soto teachers, many of whom are not caught up in that, have taken an odd stance in relation to koans and Zen practice, just to point that out. In 1223, he accompanied Myozen to China, where he visited Rinzai, Linji, masters at leading monasteries, including a big one at Mount Tiantung. In June of 2025, he encountered the Caotung, which is Soto, teacher Juqing, or Rujing, 1163 to 1228, and he studied under Juqing for a little over 2 years, during which time he achieved full enlightenment and received Juqing's Dharma transmission. He returned to Japan in 1227 at age 28. He did all that before he was 29 years old. And he took up residence once again at the Kenenji in Kyoto. He was now a certified teacher in the Caotung, Soto, Zen lineage, the teachings of which were still unknown in Japan. Until then, only the Linji, or Rinzai, approach to Zen practice was known in Japan. The remaining 25 years of his life, the first 15 of which were spent in the Kyoto area, the remaining 10 in the remote mountains of Echizen province, modern Fukui prefecture, were devoted to teaching and writing, setting down in Shobogenzo and various other works the essentials of his teaching and the rules and standards of monastic life that he wished to establish in Japan. The first of these works, Fukan Zazengi, a brief composition in Chinese, set forth the basic principles of Zazen as the authentic method of Buddhist practice. It was composed the year he returned from China while he was residing at Kenninji. He left there in 1230 for a Hanyo-in, a small temple in Fukakusa, which was about 7 kilometers south of Kyoto, and a year later, in 1231, he wrote Bendowa, which I think is an extraordinary piece, and we'll look at next time, a treatise in Japanese in which he once again promotes, this time at considerable length, the superior merits of Zazen over all other forms of Buddhist practice, explaining in detail the various reasons for its primacy. Written when Dogen was 31, this early work already contains most of the essential themes he would later develop in the major fascicles of Shobogenzo. Shobogenzo is Eye of the Treasury of the True Dharma. For this reason, Bendowa has long been regarded as the best introduction to the collection as a whole. In 1233, Dogen moved from the Anyo-in to the nearby Kanandori Kosho Horinji, name later abbreviated to Koshoji, and resided there for the next 10 years, a decade that, from a literary standpoint, was the most important and productive of his life. During this period, he wrote over 40 fascicles of Shobogenzo. Among them were Genjo Koan, Ikya, Myoju, Uji, and Busho. In 1243, Dogen turned the abbotship of the Koshoji over to one of his followers and left the Kyoto area for the remote province of Echizen. There, the following year, he founded the Daibutsuji, later named Eiheiji. The Zen circle that hangs on the stairway we bought at Eiheiji when we visited there in 2016, and I do have to say, it was an extraordinary place. The atmosphere was just extraordinary. And we had the good fortune to have quite a lengthy tour by the guest monk, person in charge of visitors, whom Sunyana Roshi had established a really wonderful relationship before we arrived, via mail, emails, and such. He gave us a really lengthy tour and took us to meet the head cook, which was a major honor, and took us to the kitchen, which is a big deal in a Zen monastery. And then we got to sit in one of the Zendos, of which there are a number, at Eiheiji, and we had a wonderful sitting there. It was a terrific experience. Maybe for our next movie night, we will show the movie titled simply Zen, which is a wonderful recreation of the life of Dogen and the creation of Eiheiji and everything he went up to do that. It's quite entertaining in many ways, and the actor who plays Dogen is a major kabuki actor in Japan, and his presence is really powerful. I mean, you can feel him entering into that role in a very significant way. Anyway, long diversion. Let's see. There he continued to teach at Eiheiji and write for the final 9 years of his life. He died in 1253 while on a trip to Kyoto seeking medical care for a chronic pulmonary illness thought to have been tuberculosis. So he died quite young. When you hear all these accounts of how, many Zen masters lived to extraordinary ages given the normal lifespan expected for people of their time, Dogen was not one of them. He died at 53, but my goodness, what he accomplished. In any case, on the Shobogenzo, it is a voluminous work comprising well over half of the total wordage of all of Dogen's remarkable literary output. It is in effect a collection of religious discourses, each one complete in itself and each one devoted to a particular subject or theme relating to Zen teaching and practice. They were delivered or written between 1231, when he was 31 in 1253, the year of his death. He seemed to have planned in even 100 of these fascicles, but apparently he managed to complete final versions of only 12. To be clear, I take great inspiration from Dogen's writing for the simple fact that if you look at the Shobogenzo, you will see he rewrote many of these pieces many times. It'll say delivered on this date, then redelivered on this date, then redelivered on this date, and he continued to rewrite his work as his understanding of both language and the mind and practice matured over time. I take a great comfort in that because I tend to rewrite. If you kind of have been around for a while, you'll see there may be 10 or 12 teishos that I do over and over, and each time I've rewritten them. So I take great comfort in Dogen's practice there. He seemed to have planned an even 100, but Dogen's holographs of these texts and manuscripts of Shobogenzo, transcribed by his followers, were copied and recopied by later generations of Soto priests. This has resulted in various different manuscript compilations of Shobogenzo, ranging from 60 fascicles to 95 fascicles. Modern editions generally consist of 95 and include all those Dogen is thought to have intended for Shobogenzo, as well as a few, among them Bendoa and Shoji, that were not originally composed for the collection, but inserted later by various editors. Let's see. Oh, this is somewhat interesting. According to the explanation in the Shobogenzo Sho, the earliest commentary, compiled by Dogen's student Kyogo, Dogen's title, which may be rendered Treasury of the True Dharma I, is a reference to the Dharma itself, the fundamental principle of Buddhist teaching. In a collection of Dogen's sayings compiled by another disciple, we're told that Dogen had intended to call the collection Shobogenzo Neihan Myoshin, that is, Treasury of the True Dharma I, Marvelous Mind of Nirvana, a title derived from the words which Shakyamuni Buddha was said to have uttered in his first mind-to-mind transmission of the Zen Dharma. That would be case 8 in the Wumen Koan. The Buddha holds up a flower. Those are the very words. So Dogen was actually drawing from a koan, the Mumen Koan, the gateless barrier, Wumen Koan, for the title of his work. Interestingly. But then he finally settled for the shorter form, Shobogenzo. It must have been like Tolkien talking with his friends. He had intended The Lord of the Rings to go on talking about Sam's life after the final words in our finished texts of The Lord of the Rings, which are, "Well, I'm back," is what Sam says when he sits down at the table and comes home. He was going to go on and talk about Sam's life, and his friend said, no, stop it there. Those are the Inklings, C.S. Lewis and others that he used to enjoy smoking his pipe and having beers with in the pub near Oxford. I think some people may have advised Dogen to cut the title as well, and so it's just Shobogenzo. The words Shobogenzo also reflect a distinction the Zen tradition likes to draw between itself and other Buddhist schools, whereas they base their doctrines on various sutras preached by the Buddha. Zen, as the school of the Buddha mind, transmits the very source of those sutras, the enlightened mind itself. So onward, we'll skip a bunch more and go directly to Fukan Zazengi. Universal promotion of the principles of Zazen. This was Dogen's first work, written in 1227, the year he returned from China. It was composed in easily memorized style of Chinese prose. He wasn't yet writing in Japanese, his mother tongue. He declares that he considered his master Juqing the only person since the Tang master Po Chang who truly understood the significance of Zazen. He praises Juqing for teaching that sitting Zazen is the Buddha Dharma, and the Buddha Dharma is sitting. This was his first attempt to transmit this teaching to his countrymen. Fukan Zazenji has been recited at the regular night sitting and on other occasions in Soto Zen temples down through the centuries. And though it's not part of the Shobogenzo proper, it's been included here because of its important place in Dogen Zen. Dane and Henry Roshi used to, not when I was with him, I don't remember him doing this, but he often began the first teisho of every sesshin. Aiken Roshi would give a teisho on the Koan Mu. Danon would read the Fukan Zazengi. Dogen explained why he wrote the work. He said, since in Japan it's never been possible to learn about the special transmission outside the scriptures or the treasure of the right Dharma, much less the principles of Zazen, they're not transmitted here, that is, in Japan. So as soon as I returned home and students began coming to me for instruction, I was obliged for their sakes to compile this work on the principles of Zazen. Long ago, the Chinese Zen master Bochang constructed a monastery, this is interesting, with a hall set aside especially for Zazen practice. In other words, that was the first Zendo. Until then, Buddhist centers really were Buddha halls, and there was, may have been meditation, chanting services, all kinds of things, but it was Bochang. I have to see who that name would be in Japanese. In any case, he created the first Zendo as an official part of Zen practice. And of course, Dogen then carried that on in Japan at Eiheiji, especially. But obviously in his earlier temples, because he emphasized Zazen, he had Zendos, which were not really current in Japan. So when we think of Zen, there's an evolving, maturing history. So in doing so, Pochang effectively transmitted the true style, the first Zen patriarch Bodhidharma. This style was distinct from the briars and brambles of word attachment that preceded him. This is something that students should know and not be confused about. So now, here is Fukan Zazengi. The way is originally perfect and all-pervading. How could it be contingent upon practice and realization? In other words, it's already perfect, whole, and complete, whether we realize it or not. Whether we realize it or not, it's whole and complete from the very beginning. Our own nature, our own mind, the nature of the universe. The Dharma vehicle is utterly free and untrammeled. What need is there for our concentrated effort? Indeed, the whole body is far beyond the world's dust. Who could believe in a means to brush it clean? It is never apart from right where you are. What use is there in going off here and there to practice? Now, he's setting up a straw man here. First of all, he's referencing the sixth patriarch with who could believe in a means to brush it clean. If you remember the story of the sixth patriarch, who was said to be illiterate and deeply enlightened upon hearing one verse from the Diamond Sutra, when he came to the monastery of the fifth patriarch, Hung Jen, he was told to go to the rice pounding shed. He was there, and then when Hung Jen was going to transmit the Dharma to an heir, he asked his disciples to write a poem. The only one who dared to write a poem was the head priest, the head monk. And he wrote, Shen Shu is his name. He was the chief disciple. He wrote, "The body is the Bodhi tree, the mind like a bright mirror on a stand. Constantly strive to brush it clean. Do not allow dust to collect." And this is what Dogen is referencing. Who would believe in a means to brush it clean? In other words, this is very efficacious practice, but it's minor in some senses. It's practice to wipe away your self-centeredness, practice to wipe away your so-called sins, practice to wipe away your lack of understanding, practice to wipe away your attachments. You practice and wipe it away. Wipe it away. It's an endless cleaning process. It's useful. But the sixth patriarch, who was said to be illiterate, had a monk acolyte, a little boy, when he read it to him, and he right away saw the problem. And so he had the little acolyte write this on the wall. Basically, Bodhi is not a tree. Neither does the mind mirror have a stand. From the first, there is not a single thing. So where can dust collect? From the first, there is not a single thing. What mind? What body? What person? Who is this interior me that we're trying to clean up? In the first, there's really nothing at all. Doesn't mean you're a zombie. It's not that kind of nothing. But if there's nothing at all, where can dust collect? Come on. As Dogen said, it's been free and untrammeled, whole and complete beyond the world's dust from the very beginning. This is Bodhidharma. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha. You don't have to work to get this. In fact, you can't get it. You can never get it because you already are it. We just don't know it. And there's our sorrow. And Dogen sets it up. He said, what use is there in going off here and there to practice? He means, why are you leaving home? It's right here, the place you begin from. To think you're going to get something is already. Where you're coming from is it. And so he then raises the essential point. He goes, and yet, after he sets it off, why bother practicing? Why go here and there? And then he goes, and yet. That's the killing blow. And yet. And yet, what happens if you don't practice? What happens if you never actualize your potential? Whatever happens if you never make use of this in your life, transforming how you live, taking responsibility for everything going on in your life. And yet, there it is. He knocks down the straw target. And yet, if, he says, there is the slightest discrepancy, the way is as distant as heaven from earth. It's right here. And yet, if you're lost in a single thought about me, myself, and I, it's as distant as heaven from earth. You're cut off, you're isolated, you're trapped. Everything is outside you. You have to protect yourself. And yet, there's a great poem of Isa, poverty-stricken, terrific haiku poet who knew so much difficulty. When his little daughter died, he wrote, "This dewdrop world is but a dewdrop, and yet, and there's Dogen, and yet, if there is the slightest discrepancy, the way is as distant as heaven from earth. If the least like or dislike arises, the mind is lost in confusion. Suppose you gain pride of understanding, inflate your own achievement, glimpse the wisdom that runs through all things, attain the way, and clarify your mind, raising an aspiration to escalate the very sky. You are making an initial partial excursion through the frontiers of the Dharma, but you are still deficient in the way of total emancipation." Blistering words. I've got it is only halfway there. To think, oh yeah, I've got it. That's it. Oh yeah, I've passed that. I passed all those koans. I've got it. You're just on the frontier of the Dharma. I've got it. It's totally mistaken. Only halfway there. Who's got what? Think again. Look again. Look at the Buddha himself, says Dogen, who was possessed of great inborn knowledge. We can trace that back to the Jatakas, thousands of lives of working at it. The influence of his 6 years of sitting upright is noticeable still. In other words, even the Buddha had to do zazen for 6 years, doing nothing else. Or Bodhidharma, who transmitted the Buddha's mind seal, the fame of his 9 years of wall sitting is celebrated to this day. Since this was the case with the saints of old, how can people today dispense with negotiation of the way? You should therefore cease from practice based on intellectual understanding, pursuing words, and following after speech, and learn the backward step that turns your light inward to illuminate yourself. Body and mind will drop away of themselves, and your original face will manifest itself. If you wish to attain suchness, you should practice suchness without delay. And then he goes on, he goes, well, do you want to know how to do that? And then he says, okay, I'll tell you. For the practice of Zen, a quiet room is suitable. Eat and drink moderately. Cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. He means while you're sitting. He doesn't mean to live like that. Look at all he did, building different monasteries, writing and rewriting over and over, trying to get his understanding and his words about it as clear as he could. He never stopped working at things. But he says, while you're sitting, cast aside all involvements and cease all affairs. Don't rearrange the furniture in your room or decide where to hang that wonderful painting. When you're sitting, let it go. Return again and again to this koan point. Not forcing anything away, not pushing anything away. That's involvement. That's taking up affairs. Attend to this breath fully while you're sitting. That's the practice. This is to drop all affairs, cast them aside. And then he says, do not think good, do not think bad. That is another koan. That is case 23 in the Woman Koan. It's about the sixth patriarch. This is his second reference to the sixth patriarch. He knew the tradition well, and he also knew the koan tradition very well. It's all here already in Fukan Zazengi. The sixth patriarch is given the robe and the bowl from his teacher, even though he's illiterate. And all the other monks have, got all the credentials, and he's like a nobody from the south who's been working in the rice pounding shed. And with that poem, the fifth patriarch realizes this is the one guy who's got it. And so he secretly gives him the robe and the bowl, and then he tells him, hide out for the next 15 years and get going now, because the other monks in the monastery, some of them were really kind of rough, one was, in fact, had been a big general in the Chinese army, are going to come after you because they won't like this. And so he goes running away. First, actually, this fifth patriarch rows him across the river, but then the sixth patriarch, the young man, the rice pounder, says, oh, let me take it because now I've got responsibility. So he starts rowing. They get across the river, and then he heads off. And the general comes after him. And the general is just completely involved in the running. In fact, what's interesting is his mind has become so focused from just going, I've got to get the robe and bowl, got to get the robe and bowl, got to get the robe and bowl from this faker, he shouldn't have had it. No, something's wrong. Got to get it. And he comes up finds the sixth patriarch, who's like, this skinny guy, and here's this huge general coming at him. And he puts the robe and bowl down on a rock. He says, take it if you want it, if that's what you want. And the general tries to lift the robe and the bowl, and he can't lift it, and he becomes kind of terrified. He starts sweating, and he goes, oh, no, I've come for the Dharma. I guess you do have something. Please teach me. And the sixth patriarch says to him, think neither good nor evil. What's your original mind right now? Before you think good, before you think evil. Dogen is drawing on this in his first piece he wrote. Do not think good, do not think bad, do not administer pros and cons. Cease all the movements of the conscious mind, the gauging of all thoughts and views. This is our whole life is spent doing this. He says, don't do it. Cease all the movements of the conscious mind. Have no designs on becoming a Buddha. Oh yeah, if I get through all this stuff, I'll be really wise. Forget all that. From the very beginning, all beings are Buddha. Forget all of it. Aiken Roshi used to say, sink into Mu. Breathe Mu. Sink into it right where you are. Sikh patriarch says, have no designs on becoming a Buddha. The practice of Zen is nothing whatever to do with the four bodily attitudes of moving, standing, sitting, or lying down. In other words, he says, it's not simply about posture. It's about insight into your own nature right now. And then he goes on to the most meticulous description of the posture for sitting. And this is what he says. He says, at the place where you regularly sit, spread out a layer of thick matting and place a cushion on it. Sit either in the full lotus or half lotus posture, of course, if you can. Chairs are fine if that's what you need. Doesn't matter. He's already told you that standing, sitting, moving, lying down doesn't matter. Now he's just saying, if you can do this, it's the least stressful way. Actually, the body can relax the most. So he goes on with all the details. And Soto is very into exactly correct posture. In any case, he says, in the full lotus posture, you first place your right foot on your left thigh and your left foot on your right thigh. In the half lotus, you simply press your left foot against your right thigh. There's also quarter lotus, and sometimes you'll see Manjushri, like in that little wooden figure right up on our altar, sitting on a lion, holding a sword. He's sitting in the quarter lotus. He's got one leg kind of hanging out there open. He's not half lotus, he's not full lotus. In some senses, quarter lotus indicates someone's getting ready to get up and do something. So it's a very encouraging posture as well. Anything that can work is useful that way. In any case, you should have your robes and belt loosely bound and arranged in order. Then place your right hand on your left leg and your left palm facing upwards on your right palm, thumb tips touching. Sit upright in correct bodily posture, inclining neither to the left nor the right, neither leaning forward nor backward. Be sure your ears are on a plane with your shoulders and your nose in line with your navel. Place your tongue against the front roof of your mouth with teeth and lips both shut. Your eyes should always remain open. Of course, that means eyes are looking down, but your head is level, but your eyes are dropping. You're not dropping your head. You should breathe gently through your nose. Once you have adjusted yourself into this posture, take a deep breath, inhale, exhale. Rock your body to right and left and settle into a steady, unmoving sitting position. Steady, unmoving. Think of not thinking. How do you think of not thinking? He says, not thinking. This in itself is the essential art of Zazen. Thinking, not thinking, that's shikantaza, just sitting, just this, everything falls away. This can be totally misunderstood. People sit there letting all kinds of things wander through their minds, but that's not shikantaza. Shikantaza is so focused, it's like you're a fighter pilot who could break out in sweat in the middle of winter because the concentration is so intense. Your mind is focused beyond everything. Think, not thinking. But koan practice is thinking, not thinking too, as is breath practice. If you totally experience this breath, or totally put yourself into the point of the koan, this is thinking, not thinking. The Zazen I speak of is not learning meditation. It's not like you get better and better in learning how to do this. You drop everything. Everything's gone. What learning could there be? Who is there to learn? And yet, we do learn. We do get better at it, like anything we practice at, whether it's playing the piano or whatever it is. If you keep at it, if you keep doing it, you will get better. Though it's not learning, it's embodying. It is simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss, is how he looks at Zazen. Simply the Dharma gate of repose and bliss. It is the practice realization, and he says that right at the start. It's not just practice, and it's not just realization. Practice is practice realization. Practice is the realization of practice. Realization is the fulfillment of practice. In fact, they're not two. It is the practice realization of totally culminated enlightenment. It is things as they are in suchness. No traps or snares can ever reach it. That means none of your mental configurings can reach it. You can't get there by thinking your way to it. The most brilliant thought falls away out of it, arises out of it, and falls away through it. But it's not that it gets you there. However, that doesn't mean as you practice, there isn't a kind of natural stepping stone of subtlety that arises. Thoughts do come, and some of them are very useful. And insights are always useful and transformative. But they don't trap you. You're not stuck there. You allow them to come and to go. One of the great things, of course, about when you're sitting alone is you can have a little notepad by you and jot down if there's a particularly useful insight that arises. That way you don't go, I got to remember this while you're sitting. Just jot it down and forget about it. And then when you're done sitting, you can look, was it useful? Was it something you want to think about further? Oh, there it is. No traps or snares can ever reach it. Once its heart is grasped, this kind of sitting, you are like the dragon when he reaches the water, like the tiger when he enters the mountain. In other words, you're completely home. There's nothing you have to add to it. There's nothing you have to get. Whatever is going on in your mind is fine. You don't have to get rid of it. You're already beyond it. What dust can cling to it? Dogen told you this right from the start. You must know that when you're doing Zazen, right there, the authentic Dharma is manifesting itself, striking aside dullness and distraction from the first. When you arise from sitting, move slowly and quietly, calmly and deliberately. Do not rise suddenly or abruptly. In surveying the past, we find that transcendence of ignorance and enlightenment and dying while sitting or standing have all depended entirely on the strength gained through Zazen. There's a number of teachers in the past who, to make a point about really posture makes no difference, and understanding frees us from even the most primal fears, such as fear of death, died while standing, died while sitting in Zazen. These are kind of extraordinary situations. As I said, to get a glimpse of this, we don't live there, but you can go, whew, I guess somebody's really got something, if they can do that. And they did. According to Zen histories, Bodhidharma and the 4th, 5th, and 6th Chinese patriarchs died while seated in Zazen. The 3rd patriarch died standing under a large tree. So, moreover, enlightenment brought on by the opportunity provided by a finger, a banner, a needle, or a mallet, the realization effected by the aid of a fly whisk, a fist, a staff, or a shout, cannot be fully comprehended by human discrimination. These are all koan references. One finger Zen is Chuchi's Zen, so that's case 3. Ananda asked Mahakashapa if the Buddha had transmitted anything beside the golden robe. Kashyapa called to him Ananda. When Ananda responded, Kashyapa told him to take down the banner at the gate. That was his, that's an important koan, number 22, so on and so on and so forth. The final one, let's see, that he lists, the gavel. Shakyamuni ascended to the seat. Manjushri rapped the gavel to signify the opening of a sermon or teisho, declaring, clearly understood is the Dharma, the royal Dharma, the Dharma, the royal Dharma is thus. Words usually uttered at the close of a teisho in I guess, ancient China. And then Shakyamuni, without saying a word, got down from the teaching seat and left the room. That's case 92 of the Hekikan-roku. So Dogen was quite conversant with the tradition, koan tradition. It cannot be fully known by the practice realization of supernatural powers either. Not about gaining any special powers. It is activity beyond human hearing and seeing, a principle prior to human knowledge or perception. In other words, from before the first thought arises, you are already whole and complete. All you're thinking to get to, your wholeness and completeness, is looking in the wrong direction. It's already there before the ladder you start climbing has even been built. Yeats has a great line in one of his final poems, The Circus Animal's Desertion, which is, I must lie down again where all the ladders start, in the foul rag and bone shop of the heart. We may run over a minute or two. We have a round of zazen after this anyway. That can be a bit shorter. We're on the last page. The lunch prep. This will be a page and a quarter. Can you stick for that? Okay. This being the case, the intelligence or lack of it, I mean, if you need to leave, then you'll just miss the end of the teisho. Up to you. Up to you. This being the case or lack of it does not matter. This being the case, intelligence or lack of it does not matter. It's already whole and complete before your first wise or foolish thought, before your first intelligent moment or your dull moment. It doesn't matter. No distinction exists between the dull and sharp-witted. If you concentrate your efforts single-mindedly, really practice. Don't sit there rearranging the furniture at home. Do your zazen when you're doing zazen. Rearrange the furniture when you're home rearranging furniture. Let it all go. Just be this breath. Be this count. Be this koan. Not forcing anything away. Allow it all. And you stay with the practice right in the midst. You are thereby negotiating the way with your practice realization undefiled. As you proceed along the way, you will attain a state of everydayness. Case 19, the gateless barrier. Ordinary mind is the way. Young Joshu, the great master, asked his teacher, Nanchuan, should I direct myself to it or not? And he was told, that's a good question. But how can you direct yourself to ordinary mind? Once you start directing yourself, you're separate from your own ordinary mind. And then he says, well, if I can't direct myself to it, I can't get it, and I can't ignore it, then kind of what do I do? He says, if you truly understand ordinary mind, you'll find it vast as outer space. Ordinary mind. Before all the stuff starts going, it's already who you are. You can live from it, act from it, think from it. In any case, the Buddha mind seal, whose customs and traditions extend to all things, is found in both India and China, both in our own world and in other worlds as well. How about that? It is simply a matter of devotion to sitting, total commitment to immovable sitting. Although it is said that there are many minds as there are people, all of them, must negotiate the way in Zazen. Why leave behind your proper place, which exists right in your own home, and wander aimlessly off to the dusty realms of other lands? In other words, why go to various thoughts and various thises and that's when you can be home in your own mind, letting everything go? And realize this, awake to this in Zazen. Practice realization. If you make even a single misstep, you stray from the great way lying directly before you. You have gained the pivotal opportunity of human form. You know the parable of the blind turtle. It said that there's a blind turtle in an endless ocean, and that there's a board floating on the ocean with a hole in it. And once every 100 years, the blind turtle rises to the surface. What are the odds that the blind turtle on this endless sea with this one board with a hole in it is floating is going to stick its head through the hole in the board? Those are the odds it takes to be born human. It is a rare thing. We take it so for granted. There are billions of human beings. Well, first of all, think this is only one planet in a galaxy of billions of worlds capable of sustaining life. It's very rare to be born a human being. It took a lot of work for each one of us, it's said in Buddhist tradition, to get here, to be a human being. Dogen says you've gained the pivotal opportunity of human form. And why is it so important in Buddhist tradition? Because it said it's only from the condition of being a human being that we can awake to our own nature, our own mind, the mind of all that underlies all living things. We can awake to it from a human condition. Do not let your time pass in vain, says Dogen. You are maintaining the essential function of the Buddha way. That is, by practicing realization, by gaining attention, by being attentive in your life. You're fulfilling something fundamental to being a human being. Doesn't mean you have to be a Buddhist, but to practice attention in all you do. Would you take meaningless delight in the spark from a flintstone, that is, in a minor thought that's arising, flashing, and then gone? Form and substance are like dewdrops on the grass. Destiny like the dart of lightning, vanishing in an instant, disappearing in a flash. Honored followers of Zen, you have long been accustomed to groping for the elephant. You know, the parable of what is the nature of the elephant? I'm sorry, Joyce, we're taking a little longer than I thought. Is it the ear? Is it the tail? Is it blind men groping an elephant? One says it's like a fan because he's touching the ear. One says it's like a snake or rope because he's touching the trunk. One says it's like a tree because he's touching the leg, and so on. These are little pieces. Why take your little piece for the whole? Why go to I've got it? Please do not be suspicious of the true dragon, which is all of it. How do you drink up the Genesee River? All of it in a single gulp. Blake wrote, more is the cry of a mistaken soul, less than all cannot satisfy. Don't be suspicious of the true dragon. Devote your energy to a way that points directly to such. He says a way. He's not saying you have to be a this or that. You have to be a Buddhist or something. He says devote your energy to a way that points directly to suchness. Revere the person of complete attainment beyond all human agency. In other words, the Buddha is who he's talking about. Gain accord with the enlightenment of the Buddhas. Succeed to the legitimate lineage of the patriarch Samadhi. Constantly comport yourselves in such a manner, and you are assured of being a person such as they. Your treasure store will open of itself, and you will use it at will. That is one of our introductory koans, interestingly. The treasure store opens of itself, and you can use it any way you like. Of course, it doesn't mean to use it egotistically. Dane and Roshi used to say, it's not your dog to beat, it's your dog to roll in the grass with. We'll stop here and recite our great vows for all. I will stop the recording. If I can find the recording.